Dr. Christopher Nguyen is the one that built the first internet connection in Vietnam. The CEO and co-founder at AITOMATIC. I often ask all the entrepreneurs about one big painful failure that they have made as an entrepreneur. You've told me the failure about your academic career before. I would love to hear this story about your entrepreneurial journey.
Here's an indication of failure, okay? Just you take a look. 5 or 6 co-founders, all PhDs, okay? All fresh PhDs, from Stanford.
That you're here in Vietnam because there are certain type of AI engineering talents that you can find in Vietnam, but not in Silicon Valley. And I would love to understand in a deeper level of what you mean by that.
There are also people that are trained fully in the digital world that they have forgotten the physical world. The majority of talent in Silicon Valley, the young people there, have spent the last decade or more learning only software. The US as a whole has come to realize the disadvantage of this.
Today I have a special guest, one of the entrepreneurs I greatly admire, Dr. Christopher Nguyen. He has so many amazing stories to tell us. Dr. Christopher Nguyen is the CEO and co-founder at AITOMATIC, a leading player in industrial AI. He has led a team of AI building industrial AIs across Panasonic's global footprint and co-founded the computer engineering program at Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. He's also a thought leader in the space of ethical and human-centric AI. A fun fact, Dr. Christopher Nguyen is the one that built the first internet connection in Vietnam. Welcome, Dr. Christopher. Thank you so much for spending time with me here today.
Thank you, Ruby. Great to be here in Saigon with you.
Glad to have you here in person. Your family came to the US as boat people, and against all the adversity, you've made the American dream in extraordinary ways so many times. So for the information for the audience, as an academic, Dr. Christopher had a doctorate in electrical engineering from Stanford. And then he co-founded the computer engineering program at Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. And then as a corporate executive, you were the first engineering director for Gmail and other Google products such as Calendar and Docs and spreadsheets, which we are still using today. Right? I'm still using all of these products today. It's so impressive. And then as an entrepreneur, you have built and exited 3 businesses. Am I right?
Well, it depends on how you count, yeah.
Including Arimo, which was backed by A16Z and then eventually acquired by Panasonic. Yes, very impressive. And so when I was looking at your LinkedIn and stalking your profile, my first question is, are you a superhuman? Tell us something that is very human about you, just to validate that you are not an AGI from the future.
How do we know we don't live in this simulation, right?
Yes,
so this is impossible to tell.
Yeah.
As far as I know, I'm human.
Yes. Tell us something about you that is very human, very ordinary.
That's a really good question. To make something up based on that question, I'm not quite prepared to answer the question.
This sounds like an answer from a robot.
I think maybe as it relates to AI today, different people motivations and where they think humanity will go and so on. I think the thing that validates my core as a human being is probably that I'm actually quite optimistic about the future. Mm-hmm. Quite optimistic about the likelihood that AI will support us and will lift us up far more than the scenario where it will dominate over us. As a human being, I look to the prospect of, and I also work toward leveraging AI, staying on top of AI, controlling AI, and then also merging with AI, right, for our own evolution as a human being. And so I think somebody who probably thinks like that is more likely to be a human than some automaton.
Well, but it also sounds like an answer that an AI would give. All right, the joke is over. Instead I go and really ask you a real human question. What is the drive behind all of your achievements? You've done a lot. You've achieved so many great things. What is the drive behind all these achievements?
Well, I would be lying if I told you I hadn't thought about that. So I'll try to give as honest an answer as I can related to that question. Certainly one of the things as I look back over my life, particularly as a child, is that I had no choice. Right? I didn't realize that at the time, but looking back, for better or for worse, luckily it has worked out reasonably well. But, like between the time I was, a refugee child, on a boat headed to Malaysia to my PhD, it was one straight line. There was no existential angst, right? There was no wondering where do I live and who am I, in a way. So I think a lot about the Maslow's pyramid. I think you're familiar with that. At the bottom of the pyramid, these are sort of the hierarchy of needs. Yeah. At the bottom is, just security, survival, and then shelter and clothing and social needs. And at the very top is self-actualization, right? And I think a lot about the luxury of being at the bottom. Because when you're at the bottom, and I have lived across that entire stack, right? When it's at the bottom, you don't have time to think about these other things. It will be a luxury to do so. So your life becomes very linear, very simple, right? You need to survive the next day, and you need to fight for the next day. But then on the other hand, there's a hope that tomorrow is always a better day. So I don't want to just you to misunderstand that this was a very sad childhood. It was a very happy child, right?
But it was rough.
But I also it's rough only looking back, quite frankly. It's how I came to learn. If I put it in mathematical terms, like there's something called the level and the slope, kind of the x and the dx dy, dx dt in this case, that we humans live not by the level, we experience not the level of our luxuries, but we experience the change in the level, right? So coming from a low base, it's pretty easy to see that tomorrow is always up. Mm-hmm. So it was always very happy. I remember living in camp in Pulau Bidong, right? And a lot of the Vietnamese refugees would recognize the name of that island. Many passed by there that actually survived the
in Malaysia.
In Malaysia, just off of the state of Terengganu. If I describe the conditions there, you would say, "Oh my God, this is like so just one level above hell." But as a child living in that, it's like my mental model is, soon we're going to be going, in that case, to France. Details a little bit, mental models back then, people thought France was the heaven that you want to go to. But in any case, tomorrow you're going somewhere better, right? To freedom, to growth, and so on. And so the hardship just kind of was not quite felt, as far as I remember. So if you ask where the drive comes from, I think the drive comes from that delta. So I actively, I believe that to the degree that I actually teach my kids, like, don't peak too early, right? I actively feel bad for, well, I guess I'll refer to like forms at 30 under 30. You see in a lot of my posts, I always denounce that, right? As exploitative of young people. But in any case, different people have different goals. But I really think that the, hope, right, really drives people. So even now at this age, I live for something better tomorrow. That's what the drive comes from. Now that comes from, hey, can I change the world? Can I tweak this thing a little bit? Can I push this technology this way? Can I help push, the sensibilities of the system this way to make what I believe is a better world? And that's where the hope comes from. And I think that slope, that dx dt or dy dt is where the drive comes from.
Wow. Your sharing remind me of a speech recently made by the CEO of...
Oh, Jensen Huang?
Yes.
Yep.
At Stanford, when he was talking about, I wish you have sufferings.
Very similar, very similar.
So you have...
I saw that segment. Yeah. I think that resonates very well.
Yeah. So it sounds like you both share the philosophy of, coming from the low level of Maslow and having that delta help you appreciate and build a lot of resilience.
Jensen was never as low as I was, trust me.
You can argue with him about that. I'm not going to talk about who's going to have a better disadvantage, right? But the common theme between you two is that adversity is actually a privilege, right? And it's the drive behind your drive, and then build your strength and resilience and appreciation for life. And then you have a huge delta of appreciation through the up and down. And it seems like if you come from very low, if you experience a lot of lows, everything else is high, right? And give you the optimism.
I think that would be the simplified version.
Yeah.
My version is a little bit more complex.
Yes. Yeah.
It depends on what level of adversity as well.
Yes.
Right. I think, for example, so the Maslow's pyramid, the level of security and shelter and so on are increasingly well addressed by today's world.
Yes.
So that matters because it makes it possible or easier. I was in that sense very lucky, right? I came to the U.S. as a child, refugee child, having nothing. I mean, not just me, but my mom as well. But it was very possible to rise above that. The adversity that many young people face today, which is at the top of even young people in Vietnam now, it's astonishing how well off people are, if you will, right?
Yes, yeah.
So now they have to deal with self-actualization.
Yes.
And I don't think society has a good, readily available answer to that yet.
Right.
So I think that dealing with that kind of adversity is probably today's greatest challenge.
It's hard to, right?
Right. There are no good solutions yet.
Yes, yeah.
Right. So that's what I mean by being lucky with have to deal with the lower level adversity.
But I think because you deal with the lower level of adversity, I mean lower in the Maslow, right? It's also help you to self-actualize, which is an adversity that young people nowadays have to.
I didn't want to get too philosophical. Would you ask me the question?
No, I'm always very curious about what is the drive behind all these amazing people in general. And just to close this part up, your children is brought up in a much more well-off environment, I believe, because you have done so well. How do you transfer that drive to them?
Do you want the long answer or the short answer?
It's up to you.
The short answer is I don't really know how.
You don't really know how?
Right.
Yeah.
The longer answer is I have systems and methods.
All right. I think we'll go.
In other words, I'm not meaning I'm doing some things very, very explicit, right? Very explicitly, but I don't know whether they work well or not. It's an experiment in progress.
I see. Well, I guess we'll dive into that another time. Yeah. So let's get back to some business topic.
Okay.
So I stalked your LinkedIn and I saw that you said AITOMATIC, your company, the current company, you're building the brain for the Industry 4.0. And I'm very curious about that definition. First, what is Industry 4.0? And then second, does it mean to build the brain for this era of industry?
Mm-hmm. Well, Industry 4.0, some people say 5.0, others say 6.0. Is this a catch-all term for what is going to come next in terms of industry? For me, there is for many people, it's like you add AI to something. I think it's much deeper than that. The way I think about it is that there is an abrupt distribution, the bimodal distribution between technology diffusion between the digital world and the physical world. Let me try to describe this in a more compact way. Digital technology, or computer technology, we talked about cyberspace and so on. It turns out the reason we talked a lot about cyberspace early on was because our computers could only exist in cyberspace, right? So we imagined cyberspace right away. In the last 10 or 20 years, with the advent of sensors and actuators that can touch and feel the physical world, and then with AI technology that can interact with the physical world, I'll explain what I mean by that more precisely later, we are beginning to be able to apply all of that technology to the physical world, to industry. Put another way, all of the wonders of technology that we've felt since, Google, Facebook, and so on, has not been equally felt by the physical world, by the industrial companies like Panasonic, like Samsung, like Tesla even, right? These are the companies that touch our lives, that move us around, that feed us, and so on. But we are at the threshold of all of these technologies suddenly through this translation capability of AI, right? I think of generative AI is more about communication than about intelligence. That's very important. So in other words, what people think of these large models, language models, they seem so smart, but that's not the main value today. The main value is that they serve as a translation layer between the digital world and the physical world. Because the digital world is very structured. The physical world is very fuzzy, right? So having that translator in between, like a yin-yang or digital analog translation, is going to enable all of the technological advances we've had in the last 50 years to suddenly be applicable to the physical world. And that means that this whole world, which is $25 trillion a year in total, output, will suddenly be boosted, right? The productivity will increase, the value created will increase. And so that's Industry 4.0, right? So it's not any single thing. It is also true to say it is AI applied to it, but I think that misses the larger transition that is happening. And of course, with all that, to try to build the brain, or one of the key brains for that transition, I think it is a really exciting venture to me.
Wow. So what does that brain consist of, and what are you building in that brain?
I love that you asked that question, because I'm going to talk about it.
Well, you can think about it right now.
Let's talk about what that brain is not. Do you think, for example, that the large language models, or even the large vision models of today, coming from OpenAI, coming from Google, Gemini just announced 1.5, which has 1 trillion token context window. Do you think that is enough to be the brain?
That has to go into what is a brain, right?
Right, exactly.
So
I'm here to say, emphatically, it's not enough.
And why?
Right. But before I say why, I think a lot of people would disagree with that statement that I just made. A lot of people are amazed, and appropriately so, by the powers that are suddenly being expressed by these large models, right? They do have kind of a model of the world in them. They do seem to understand. You can ask a question, and it gives a reasonable answer. In fact, probably a better formatted answer than most of us could give, right? So isn't that the brain? But what they really lack is, if you think about the functions of the brain as we have evolved, think of it as 3 layers, right? It's sort of roughly mapped to the primitive mind, and there's a part that is very intuitive, right? We refer to that roughly as inferencing. Very, I give you a stimulus, you pass it through your neurons, and then out come a response, right? Very immediate. It is intelligence, but it is only one lower form of intelligence, intuition and inference. Above that is a layer that we refer to as reasoning, right? And reasoning, there's different kinds of reasoning. There's pattern match reasoning, but I'm talking about a higher level than that. Pattern match reasoning is when I say, if A equals B and B equals C, then your mind immediately thinks A equals C. That may seem like deliberative reasoning, but you actually didn't think that through. You remember that pattern, right? So you just did pattern matching. It is a kind of reasoning. But there's another kind of reasoning that is required to be iterative. You have to think it, and then think over it, and then think about it again. And each time you go through this loop, the world may have changed a little bit.
Yes.
The data may have changed a little bit. So we call that deliberative reasoning. That is absent in these large models today. The level 1 and level 2 is possibly mapped to the 3 layers that I'm going about. The layer higher than reasoning is planning, right? You actually, given a task, you wouldn't just say, given this task, here's the answer. I got to observe my, what resources I have and orient, understand it, and then after that decide what to do and then act, right?
But isn't that whole planning process is iterative as well?
Exactly. So you can think of it as almost, there's different models for planning. You can think, the model that I like is hierarchical planning, right? Given a task, if I can do it in one step, I do that. But otherwise, I will break it down to multiple steps. And then these multiple steps, I repeat again that whole process. We humans do this very intuitively,
yes,
right? But it is our higher brain, if you will, higher brain function processing. So to sum it up, essentially, there's this pyramid that goes at the bottom, inferencing, above that is reasoning, and then above that is planning. And planning and reasoning in the iterative nature are completely absent in these large models.
Yes.
Right. So that's a long way of describing that's the whole structure. That brain is what we're building at AITOMATIC.
That sounds like a brain for AGI as well.
It is. But of course, we're building some, you can think of it as building a prototype for it.
Yes, yeah. And then it's not just...
Because we also want to build it in such a way that we can take it to market and solve some of these problems right away. Right? We're not here at a research lab to build something that, doesn't work for 20 years.
Yeah, but I think your approach is even better because you take it to the market and get the physical world to be connected to that brain.
Right. Well, it's certainly different, right?
Yeah.
Like Larry Page always wanted to build the operating system for the whole internet. But, you had to start with the search engine, which people could use and buy.
Wow, sounds like one day you're going to be a competitor with OpenAI to build the next AGI.
I think in this expanding universe, which really the whole AI space is, I think the opportunity space is so large that it's very difficult to predict who is competitive with whom, right?
Yes, yeah. But there's certainly a race to that, right? To that AGI moment.
I would say I'm not trying to build AGI. My aims are simpler than that.
I would make a guess that it's going to be a byproduct of what you're building. Maybe a version of AGI that is different than the one that is being developed by OpenAI.
Right.
That sounds like it's...
We're building essentially problem solvers for enterprise. Right?
Yeah.
Problem solver meaning, think of a field service technician. Let's say somebody who services refrigerators or air conditioners. They go out in the field, they see what's wrong. If they have the right part, they replace it and, everything's done. But that assumes that they are an expert. But, typically in a company, like, let's say Panasonic, there are, say 10,000 service engineers. There are about 4 experts. I mean, the number is skewed that way because the labor force is skewed that way. So how do you, if in the status quo, the young or inexperienced engineer going out do what they can, but a lot of times they cannot fix the problem. So some of those times they call in and speak to the expert, but the line is busy. So then they leave without having fixed it, and what's called first-time fix rates are very low. But imagine if we can somehow replicate, reproduce, multiply, scale the experts that are already, in these companies, so that they're available to the entire workforce. Then we can multiply the productivity of these people by a factor of 10. Right? And the process of doing that, when they're out there, they're not doing visual, they're not just doing image recognition. They're not generating answers to question. They're actually conducting workflows, right? If you look at the pressure first, and then pressure is too high, now what? turn that down and then check the temperature and so on. So this loop here is a problem to be solved, right? So it requires a brain or a system that has level 2 intelligence to do so, right? Most of the AI you see today is level 1 intelligence. It can only inference, right? One pass, input, infer something and then output.
And so I have 2 questions to follow up with that. Number one is, you described the example of a technician to fix some issues, right? Is that one of the use cases that you're actually building?
Yes.
In real world for companies like Panasonic?
Like Panasonic, like Miura, like Tokyo Electron, right?
And then number 2, my question is, you're describing that the brain of the Industry 4.0 is at level 4 of thinking and reasoning.
Level 2, yeah.
I mean, right now it's at level 2. Right now it's at level 1.
Well,
right? The brain of the industry is...
You just have to stick to one way of thinking about it. Like I say, a lot of people call system 1 and system 2 a level 1 and level 2 thinking.
Okay, I see.
Level 1 is only inferencing and level 2 has planning and reasoning.
Okay, so that's 2 levels right there.
Really.
And so what is required for that brain to go from level 1 to level 2?
Today's systems, I wouldn't call it brain, today's system has only level 1 capabilities. It needs, fundamentally, in a funny way, it needs a loop. It needs recurrence, right? It needs the concept of time. It needs to do something, infer something, and then check on the state of the world again, right? It lacks such a loop. That's the most fundamental thing. Without a loop, you cannot deliberate. Without a loop, you cannot plan, right? And then even if you have a loop, you need some reasoning capability around it, right? You need to look at something and then reason through that and then, decide and then act accordingly.
And so how do you build that loop into your system?
That's a really deep question, actually. I would say there are 2 major classes of doing so from a machine learning point of view. In computer science, there's something called imperatively, meaning I just tell the system to do that, right? I mean, computer program is just a way to tell the system. So imperatively means I write actual code, let's say in Python or C or other languages, to say, hey, I want you to execute this loop, right? And then I want you to break a task down into multiple steps and so on. So that's sort of class 1, one class. The other class is to build, to use an architecture for neural networks such that the capabilities of planning and reasoning is somehow emergent, right? Just like if you think about neural networks, right? 10 years ago, most people haven't heard of it. Now people say, I know what they are, right? But if you look at the way they are built, all of it is quote unquote emergent, if you will, right? We don't write a computer program to tell it how to interpret images anymore, right? We just build a network and then we train it and the network learns to recognize that pattern. So the second major way of doing what you ask is to build using some architecture, some neural network architecture, such that there is some kind of built-in planning and reasoning capabilities that are emergent. Okay? I'm not sure if that's a...
No, it makes sense.
So one is write explicit code to do it.
Yeah, heuristic, right?
The other is taking a machine learning approach to it.
And how evolved is that machine learning nowadays? When would it be able to do level 2 intelligence, like you said?
I would say at least, the machine learning, the pure machine learning approach, I would say at least 5 years, and comfortably, for sure, within 10 years. And there's a reason for that. It's very interesting. If you look back, if you have a context of technology, you can sort of know and tell. there's a reason why we don't do it today. There's always a reason why we didn't do it before, and that reason is always the same. It was not feasible. Not feasible usually because computers are not fast enough, but not fast enough for what? For a given cost, right?
Yeah.
Even big data became prevalent because storage became cheap, right? Big compute became prevalent because compute became cheap. Mm-hmm. So these machine learned architecture that has these built in somehow this emergent capability for planning and reasoning inherently requires what I said earlier, loops, right? These loops are recurrent, but they're literally feedback connections from the front, back to the back and so on. And for a computer to run that loop is very expensive.
Right.
Right. So today, if you look at all neural network architectures, they only flow in one direction. Right. So
they don't flow back.
That's right.
I see.
And that's the reason why. So we can build those things with massive scale. If you try to put loops in there, it would be too expensive. So people are not doing that yet. Right. But they can do this. So what emerges is what I call level 1 intelligence.
I see. So who's solving the expensive problem? Is it NVIDIA?
It's gonna be the major players that are doing that. And I'm not saying anything that a lot of the researchers don't know. Like Yann LeCun, famously has an architecture for this. He's almost a lone voice in the desert, arguing the same thing that I'm arguing. Of course I'm arguing it too, but nobody hears me. They hear his. Right?
I'm hearing you.
But I really respect Yann's thinking process around this, and he has also proposed a neural network like architecture for doing that. But I suspect because of compute limits and so on, people will start to show prototypes of it, right? But I think for it to be fully prevalent, it'll take 5 years. And that's why there's time for companies like mine to be doing it the imperative way.
I see. Right. So you're still doing it the imperative way.
Right.
But do you have a plan to switch or to evolve into
as technology evolves, there's no reason why we would not do that.
So I would be very curious to learn how you're still building this amazing technology and make it a business at the same time and sustain all the business operation. Can you share a little bit more about your business, monetization, and getting customers to pay for the solution?
Yeah, the business model is very, very traditional, right? Yeah. Like, there's a wisdom, right? Conventional wisdom that you should not innovate on two things at the same time, right? So we innovate on technology. Don't innovate on your marketing. Don't innovate on your sales. Don't innovate on your business model. Our business model is what's called enterprise sales, right? Yeah. So, and these are big ticket enterprise, right? That's just where this is just where my muscle.
Your background.
It's not better or worse. It's that you do what you know, right?
Yeah.
And I have a lot of friends and people that I know well that respect me and I have mutual regard for in the industry. So that gives me an unfair advantage, in that motion in that world. But the typical flow, go to market is people hear about us through intros or through marketing and so on, and then they call us up, they contact us. And then, we have an SDR, or we have somebody call out and assess the need, right? And then if there's a good match, we also filter as well, right? We don't want to waste people's time and we don't want them to waste our time.
Yeah.
Right. And then if there's a good match, we go to a POC, right? Proof of concept. And I dare say our success rate with proof of concept has been very, very high, right? And then that transitions to usually that's a 30-day POC, and then that transitions to an enterprise contract, right? And so there's a price range that we live in, right? And as you get more customers, you get more automation, and you scale the business that way.
So the way that you work with your customers, do you have to tailor a lot of solutions or part of the solutions for them specifically?
Right. That's a good question. Can I answer that in the long way?
Yes, please.
Because a lot of people misunderstand, right? Yeah. Particularly VCs who don't know anything.
Yeah.
It is true that a technology company has a product. And a lot of times that product is not the solution. There's a gap between the product and the solution. And the customer wants a solution. So somebody has to fill that gap, right? And that gap is usually done in using human beings, right? The product you build once, and then as software, you just stamp it out digitally, if you will, over time. This closing of the gap today is generally done by human. But even that is increasingly aided by AI. But let's set that aside for a moment. But there's no escaping having to close the gap between product and solution. The people always ask a startup, say, how much work is that? And the answer is, when are you asking me that question? Right? You always start out with a lot of that. And then over time, you reduce that, right? And it's, and you never want to make it zero. I'll talk about why you don't want to be zero later. But you want it to be a smaller and smaller part of your business, so that your revenues coming from what the solution part, which is the services part, becomes a smaller percentage of your product revenues, right? But it would be very naive for anyone to ask the question, say, oh, you are, 50% of your revenues is services. That's no good. That's a very naive statement. You have to say, where in the product cycle, not even where in the company cycle, every product has to go through that same cycle over and over again. So to answer your question, where is our product, in this particular cycle, it is about 80%, the value 80% is in the product and 20% is in the customization.
Well, it sounds like a golden ratio already.
So it is pretty far along.
Yes.
But it started out at 100. It was started at 0, 100.
Wow.
Right. It has to. It must. Anybody who starts building a product before they touch the market is wishful thinking, right? You're wishful that you know what the market wants, right? And by the way, I used to make the mistake all the time, and young entrepreneurs make this mistake all the time. They have this idea for a product, and they work with their friends inside a room like this, for 6 months, and here's the product, and nobody wants it.
Yeah.
And then they have to begin the discovery process when they should have done that 6 months ago.
Right, yeah.
Right. So starting out at 0, 100 is the right way.
By the way, how many times did you learn that mistake for you to realize that it's actually several?
I learned slowly, I suppose. There's learning, and then there's sort of your bias and your tendency.
Right, yeah. Would you consider your company a startup?
Yes, absolutely.
Why?
Why not? What's a startup to you?
So the definition that I buy into is the one by Paul Graham from YC. Is a company that has enormous potential to scale and can grow fast and heavily tech-driven.
I would say our company fits that definition, although I think that definition is very much investor-driven. Right, that's saying that it's a startup that I can invest in. Right, there's nothing wrong with it, but it doesn't include a lot of startups that, for example, may never scale to be huge, right? Or doesn't have the ambition to take over the world, right? And investors have this almost derogatory term for that. They call it a lifestyle business. I think anybody who finds a good lifestyle business is good.
It's great.
Right? That's right. Right. So I would consider people who set out to do that at the beginning, that would be a startup as well. Yeah. Right. So anyway, so we
inclusive.
Exactly. Yeah. We happen to fit the program model because that's the startup style that I know. Yeah. Right. But I wouldn't be as exclusive in the definition.
And talking about investor, how do you think about funding for your company? What did you do, and what is your route to funding to grow fast and achieve the ambition that you want to achieve? Because I understand that your business is going to require a lot of investment.
That is one of the things that I continue to learn, right? I wouldn't say that I've always possessed this conviction.
Mm-hmm.
But particularly with AITOMATIC, my conviction, it sounds very strange, but it sounds so strange that why wasn't it always like that?
I see.
My conviction is business first. Maybe the moderated view is that you do what the environment affords, right? For the last 10 or even 15 years, because of the abundance of capital, it's been very fashionable and even necessary to put a team together with an idea and then go raise money. And as long as there's investors willing to do that, I mean, it works for as long as it works. But it has created a whole class of companies that actually don't have business value, right? Because not all people who raise money are also building businesses. I think we are now returning to more fundamentals, even though there's still a lot of money out there. But the money now is asking businesses to say, or companies to say, why don't you be a business first? And it does so implicitly through like Series A asking, what's your revenues,
Mm-hmm.
right? Mm-hmm. For a very long time, there were Series A done that have no revenue. And not that it's not an exception, like there are a lot of generative AI company, big, foundation models and so on, right?
Mm-hmm.
That start out raising $1 billion, and that didn't work. That is starting to show that, there are going to be a number of big failures very soon already, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're not advertised as failures. What I believe in is let's spend time. Yes, you have an idea, right? But as I say, start out with 0 product, 100% services,
Mm-hmm.
and then go talk to your customers, your friends, right, your colleagues,
Yeah.
and then iterate along that product vision, along that technology vision. Like my technology vision, I already shared with you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Problem solving, intelligence. But how does that translate to what people need today? That's a very hard process.
Right.
It's much easier for me to articulate level 2 intelligence than to map it correctly to what people are willing to pay for today.
Yes.
Because there's no way I could do that with pure intelligence alone. I have to go talk to people.
Yeah.
I have to try projects, right? I have to provide them with a solution that they need. Mm-hmm. And in the process, somehow extract sufficient pattern to say that, oh yeah, that has nothing to do with what I want to go. Oh, that is everything I want, where I want to go. And doing such a way that it maps the rhythm of the market too. That to me is a greater challenge of doing startup than technology vision. For me, technology vision is.
It's easy for you.
I hate to sound arrogant, but to me, it's like I see things. Yeah, that's not the hard part.
So you said business first, investment second, right? How do you, business first, is it getting the customer to pay for you first, getting to profitability or break even first? What is business first?
At High Resolution, it's definitely getting customers to pay for you first. It is not getting to break even first. And I'll explain why.
Mm-hmm.
It's still building the business first, right?
Right.
First, there's no business if there's no customers willing to pay. So
Right.
Clearly, you got to get customers to pay for it.
Yeah.
Initially, customers are really paying for your services, right? But they have to buy into the vision too.
Right.
I'm not just there to do anything. I come with a vision and I share it, and then we brainstorm with the customers, and they say, maybe that could help me with this. And in some cases, I don't know what to do with it, in which case there's nothing to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
But in any case, if they say, maybe that could help me with this, then you write code. You write custom code with technology that's available at the time. And you'd have to deliver to them the solution that you promised to deliver. But while you're doing that, you are learning something. You're creating some IP.
Yeah.
You're creating a piece of the product, right? And believe me, you rewrite the product many times, right? Mm-hmm. But in the process, you have honed a product vision that follows your technology vision. Mm-hmm. And then from the product vision, you go to a particular product articulation that fits the time and the scale of the mm-hmm. market. Right? And if you hit PMF or part of market fit, then you're ready to go, right?
Right.
So that's getting customers to pay. Break-even is a more complicated term. Break-even could mean in absolute terms or break-even in terms of the relative term, right? You always have, when you run a business, there's always an aspect where you are investing R&D for the future.
Yeah.
And there's an aspect where it is your profit from the existing IP, right? When you're growing fast, you're always investing more than you're extracting, right? By definition. Mm-hmm. Hopefully, if you're not, then you're in trouble. You're already, the S curve is like this as opposed to over here. Over here, you're in the extractive phase. You're not creating anymore, but you're just coasting on your existing IP. Mm-hmm. But when you're here, you're creating a new product, right? You're investing in the future. Mm-hmm. At the same time, you are getting your customers to pay and finance, your. Mm-hmm. So in other words, I'm saying that it's not that you reach break even before you raise money. You can start raising money for growth once you are convinced, right? And the customers, can validate that. And investors can see that, okay, I'm investing into your growth phase now. That's when you raise money, mm-hmm. but not before.
Mm-hmm. So I've seen that. Sorry, let me redone this. So to follow up with your sharing, you mentioned the definition of product market fit, and I would love to understand how you think about product market fit and how do you see the indicators that give you the conviction that this is a product market fit?
My most general answer is that nobody really knows.
That's why I keep asking every entrepreneurs I meet.
As a concept, it is well accepted.
Yes.
As a definition and what are the metrics that are used to indicate product market fit? There's widespread disagreement. But I think there's reasonable disagreement because there's not a one-size-fits-all, right? And so there are different frameworks for thinking about it, right? But all of these things capture something in common. You have product market fit when the following high-level measures occur, right? Number one is there's a sense the market is pulling you as opposed to pushing it, right? What is that? Though it translates in terms of metrics, the number of orders that are coming in. Now, don't confuse it with heavy marketing, right? Because if you can always create arbitrary demand, all right. But there's a lot of pull. There's a lot of demand that comes naturally, as opposed to through inorganic demand generation. I'm not saying inorganic demand generation is bad. No, it's very good. It's necessary.
Yes.
But don't use that as a signal for product market fit, right? Mm-hmm. Use that as a tool for testing the market.
Right.
So that's sort of one kind of metric, one set of metrics that you look for. Another set of metrics or measure that you look around for is that I lost my train of thought. So the order flow, also the sales cycle, right? Sales cycle is in enterprise is a very imprecise term. Everybody, again, investors use it, and I'm an investor as well, except I know the operation, so I know what the stupid questions are. People say, what's your sales cycle like? And anybody who gives you a sharp answer is lying, because there's a big distribution among your customer. You got a customer pool of 20. It's not like a statistical significant. Yeah. And one is 1 year, one is 6 months. It's messier than pattern matching investors would like to bring. You notice this whole podcast, I've been depositioning investors.
Maybe someone who's interested in you is listening to this.
Right. But maybe I shouldn't do that to it. But the point is, having said that, there is a sense of, let's say, take the average or the median of your sales cycle. If that's tightening, if it goes from 12 months to 6 months to 3 months, and you get to self-service, right, then that's also an indication of a product market fit. Right? So you notice these measures are indication of some people refer to as a flywheel, right? Mm-hmm. You're pushing really hard, for the thing to, like the propeller of an airplane, to start to go, and then you let go and it stops, and you push again, and then at some level you start pushing and it gets a little easier to push, and then you let go and it keeps on going. Right? That's product market fit. Right? So look for the right metrics that are appropriate for your business. Right? Just don't go with any general blog and say this is the framework.
I think most of the blogs or the definition is put out there by investors.
Right.
I think the most famous one is by Andre. What is his name? Andreessen. Yeah.
Actually, I really know there's one by also Andreessen Horowitz, but my friend Peter Levine, with a CEO I forget. But the reason I recall that I really like their what they call product market sales fit. PMSF. And the reason they want to call it PMSF is it turns out, particularly for enterprise, the sales motion, how you go to market, how you reach the market, is itself a way part of your product.
Right.
That is what you build and how you sell it should be fully integrated. Should be right. You got to, you could build a perfect product, but you sell it wrong. Or you could have a perfect sales machine, but not have the right product. So, for example, there's something called founder-led sales, right?
Yep.
And you know what that term means,
yes.
Right? And naive young people are constantly told that they should they should have a phase where it's founder-led, and they should have a phase where it's
the sales
organization. That is such toxic advice.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Okay.
Right?
Don't do that. Yeah.
Right? Because
founder always have the lead sales. Is that what you mean?
It's kind of like the sales cycle thing. If people think of it as some very sharp definition, founder should always be selling.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Maybe you become a smaller percentage of the sale. You should, because you have a team that can do that. But there's no such thing as, my plan is by June I'll hire a team, and then they do the selling, not me.
Right. Yeah.
If it works, you're lucky. Most of the time it doesn't. Right? Yeah. Because the founder, the tech visionary, has to be there to essentially to provide that product market fit. In a large organization, it would be the product manager. That's why sometimes people refer to the product manager as the CEO of their organization. It's not about, the powers that they have. It's about the responsibility that they have for making sure that there's product market fit. Yes. That they have to be the one out there selling.
Yeah.
Right.
And how do you see the evolution of product market fit? It's always a moving target, right? It's never a fixed destination, because a lot of time when we talk about it, it seems to be like a fixed destination. But
there's a difference between a moving target and a fixed destination.
Yeah.
I think it is fixed milestones.
Fixed milestone.
Right. It's not a single milestone, but it's not moving either. There's a point where you say, I've the flywheel has started going. It is a valid point, right? But it's not. Some people, when they think about product market fit, is, I don't have product market fit, now I have it. No. So it turns out you have to have milestones in between, right? So initially, for example, you don't have sales yet. Let's say, how do you know? And when you have sales, you don't have the short cycle yet. You don't want to fly blind all the way from the beginning to the point where the flywheel flies itself. So in between, there must be indicators.
Yeah.
Right. For example, you would try different GTM, different go-to-market, right? First, you might try cold calling, let's say. Second, you may try advertising. Third, so on. All of those things are data points that you should take into account. Let's say you decide to use Google Ads, right, to put out some messages. And suddenly you put out a message and a lot of people click through that ad. Well, that's a signal that you have some product idea fit, right? You should pursue that. If you get no response, that's some signal, right? So that's one example. And then as you go through and you start implementing, right, let's say you do a POC, and then you discover that every POC is different. There's no pattern here. Then that's not cannot claim any product market fit. Or you could find the other situation. Wow, I'm doing 3-4 different projects, and they all have a theme here. And the theme may not be your product vision to begin with. In fact, a lot of times they're not. It's along your technology vision, but it's a different product articulation than you thought. But you should go after that, right? Because don't be too married to your product idea to begin with, right? It's only your long-term vision that matters most. So when you see, every customer is asking for X, right? Even though I was offering Y, right? For example, I'll give you a real example. How many of my customers do you think are asking for the level 2 intelligence right now? Right.
0. That's my guess. Yeah.
Well, I should say this. Approximately 0. When they hear me talk about it, they want it. But what are they willing to buy today? They're willing to buy what I call really good level 1. Today, out there in the market, a lot of people are offering something called RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation, for Q&A. And we actually have built a system that has some trade secrets that can give you very high accuracy. I talk about that later. I'm pretty excited about it. But that's not level 2 intelligence. So do I say, I hate that, I don't want to do that? No, people are willing to pay me for it. And it is on the way to my ultimate, product vision. So we're absolutely printing that, and selling it like hotcakes for money. Right?
So, Dr. Christopher, I look into our notes. We talked a few years back, and I remember the conversation. You mentioned that you are here in Vietnam because there are certain type of engineering talents, AI engineering talents that you can find in Vietnam, but not in Silicon Valley. And I would love to understand in a deeper level of what you mean by that.
I was referring to, and I would still refer to, you remember earlier we talked about the digital-physical divide? There are also people that are trained fully in the digital world they have forgotten the physical world. And I literally mean subject like physics, right? Physics is a very special subject. Math came from physics, not the other way around, right? In countries that are still industrial, like Japan, like Vietnam, like some parts of Europe, people still grow up, learning about the physical world. Like they take physics, and they take engineering degrees that have physics in it. The flip side of it is that the talent that is readily, by and large, the majority of talent in Silicon Valley, the young people there, have spent the last decade or more learning only software, right? Because that's where the money has been. Right? That's where the demand has been. I mean, up to about 2 years ago, and until the great layoffs happened, that's massive demand, as you know. In fact, that led to all of these Lambda schools and other things that sort of stamp out almost software engineers in a 6-month, 9-month period. And I think it's wonderful. It's transformative to people's lives and so on. But it's also a function of an economy that now we look back and that overemphasizes the role of software at the expense of hardware, or the role of the digital versus at the expense of physical, to the degree where the skills that are needed for companies like mine, like the stuff that we do, we write software, but it requires an intuition about the physical world. Think about it. Our customers do refrigeration, they do avionics, they do automotive, they do marine navigation. All of these, oil and gas, all of these things require an understanding of something about physics, right? We don't have to be an expert in each of these domains, but if you don't know these things, it's very, very hard to close the gap. And if your entire skills, your worth really is about moving bits, through the system, you will find it very challenging, like almost boring in some cases, to do what we do, right? Or if you have physical insight, you will find it exhilarating and exciting, right? Now the interesting thing is this, right? The U.S. as a whole has come to realize the disadvantage of this. So, there's a reindustrialization of the U.S. happening, right? That is now a more common term. The U.S. Inflation Reduction Act, the CHIPS Act, is intended to bring that physical world, manufacturing and, of course, high-end manufacturing and so on. But we stopped making things in the U.S., and that has turned out to be a geopolitical disadvantage, right? So what's happening there now is perhaps my favorite example, and I think you have to look up a lot more. I probably can't spend all the time talking about it, is the present failure of TSMC in Phoenix compared to its relative success of the same company in Kyushu, Kumamoto, Japan. These are two efforts of TSMC to set up fabrication, world-class fabrication plants outside of Taiwan, and they started at the same time. Mm-hmm. The Japan effort is about to produce the first wafers ahead of time. Mm-hmm. And I believe the total spend was under $10 billion. It's astonishing for that plant. The one in Phoenix, Arizona is way over budget. I think it's now estimated to be $45 billion or more. Wow. When all is said and done, and way behind schedule.
I think Obama made a documentary that is similar. There's a story that is similar to that.
I mean, the effort to reindustrialize is very admirable and very necessary, but now we're seeing the challenges of doing so. It's a lot more than just saying, "Oh, I got money, it's going to happen." Yep. Right? It's an entire culture. Mm-hmm. Anyway, that's a very long answer to your question.
Yes,
about engineers.
So you've been building the engineering team in Vietnam for a while, and so how big is your team now, and what are your views and experience of hiring and managing and developing engineering talents here?
Well, your question assumes, and quite understandably, that all we have here is engineering talent.
Oh, yes. So you have other talents too, so that's great.
Our entire product engineering is here.
Tell me more.
Yeah, we don't have product elsewhere. It's here.
All right. And I keep hearing, even in my own experience as well, that having great product people in Vietnam is very hard to find.
Yep.
I assume, maybe I'm wrong, but I assume that you developed them.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of the two.
Okay.
We have a great product manager who used to be a product designer, who used to be a UX designer. Right, but who has the right sensibilities, and we give her the responsibility, and she grew to that role.
Wow! So you built.
So I think the lack of anything is as much a lack of opportunity. I don't mean just opportunity as here it is. I mean the opportunity is the challenge. Hey, you got to do this job, right? And then smart people figure out how to do it, and it's just an increasing number here.
That's awesome. And what is your view about product engineering design talents pool in Vietnam, and how do we develop more of them?
I certainly believe it is possible to do, right? Depends on the scope of what you're looking for, right? And the amount of time you're willing to invest. I think in terms of getting more, I think organically is probably best, right? There's not in terms of product management school and so on, there are a lot of online tools and class, like, I forget the name, but anyway, Reforge or something like that.
Yeah,
right?
Reforge. Yeah.
And the other online classes that have this camaraderie among advanced and budding product managers. I think that those things are globally accessible now, right? What's missing is startups or multinationals that are willing to say, we're going to set up our product organization here. Right, and we're going to bring people in and give them the opportunity and the challenge to grow to do so. But everything is an ecosystem effort. So, for example, we have people that will grow, and they may go and do other things at other companies, starting their own companies and so on. So that would just organically grow. That's
great to learn that you actually set up your whole product and engineering and design team here in Vietnam, which is amazing from your background. From Silicon Valley.
It's not a charitable view. It's
actually pragmatic.
It's really necessary much more desirable if you can to have product and engineering in the same place.
Yes.
I mean, how do you? It's like left hand and right hand, right? The disconnect would be so great.
Yep.
Right. In fact, that's the reason I am physically here. We have a product push, and I feel that the disconnect between me, really, I'm the chief product officer, if you will.
Yeah.
Right. With the product engineering team would be so great if I were not here doing this product push.
That's awesome. So usually on this podcast, I often ask all the entrepreneurs about one big painful failure that they have made as an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
You've told me the failure about your academic career before. I would love to hear this story about your entrepreneurial journey.
So last time you asked, you always ask the same question, and I told you about my transition, my painful transition from academia to industry, right?
Yeah.
I thought about it last time, and honestly, that was sort of the biggest thing I could think of. I'm not sure. So you want to hear maybe something lesser pain, but having more to do.
Something new.
I mean, I can't just make it up, right?
I'm sure you have a lot of failures, or maybe you wouldn't call it failures, but big learning lessons.
No, they're all failures. It's just they're not the biggest. I already shared with you the biggest.
So the second biggest.
But the most painful. Right?
Yeah.
It's actually very proximate to the academic failure, the entrepreneurial part. I don't remember whether I told you the full story of why I decided to leave the university, right?
I don't remember that part either.
But it actually was very much related to a failed business venture. Okay. So here's the story of painful failure from entrepreneurial activity, right? But that led to the academic departure on my part. So I was this young professor in Hong Kong, HKUST, 1993. And so you can imagine, sort of go back to that time, particularly if you are kind of from the industry. I was hacking Berkeley Unix back in 1984 and so on, literally. So I by 89, I was very excited to see the first internet.com, right? The Morris worm was also in 1989. So by 93, it was very clear to me, right, that this internet thing was huge, right? This was even before the launch of Netscape in 1995. Mm-hmm. So I, being very naive in business, but I would say naive in everything, but business in particular, decided to get a bunch of friends of mine together and say, let's start an internet business.
Very trendy at the time.
It was before it was trendy.
Before trendy?
Just before it was trendy. But then it became trendy around 95, 96, and so on. But we get together and we said, we wrote this whole manifesto, like the time has come and all of that. And that we are the technologists, we know this stuff. Here's an indication of failure, okay? Just you take a look. Like, there were like 4 or 5 or 6 co-founders, all PhDs. Okay. If you're an investor today, that's a counter signal. Okay.
Oh, okay.
All fresh PhDs, from Stanford, because that was my network, right?
Nice.
Having full time doing other things. I was a young professor. My colleagues, one was at Intel, another one was at Broadcom, and another one was also a professor at my. And by the way, that's I can name him Curtis Ling, right? And Curtis has gone on through all these failures. He can tell you a lot. He's now the co-founder and CTO of a New York Stock Exchange listed company, right? So you can talk to him about that, Max Linear. But he and I were very naive. So we all got together with an older professor as well. We started a company called Bon Vive, right? And Bon Vive come from my French knowledge, Bon Vivant, right? It's like the good life. And so we decided what we would do is build the internet presence for the restaurant industry. That's deadly error number 1. It's like starting out the gate, we picked the wrong industry. Okay, you have any friends who are in the restaurant business?
Yes, I have a lot.
There's no money in it.
Yeah, unfortunately,
right?
yeah.
Right. So naive, right? It was set up for failure. But everybody was interested in talking with us. We talked to the hospitality industry, and I remember at one point, my very wiser, also PhD friend, he had a PhD in physics, and then he went on to JD, right? Also at Stanford. He was somehow in charge of our finances. He was in IP law, intellectual property. But then he had a heart-to-heart with me, and he said, call me Kwong, right? But they call him Kwong. Hey, if you think about it, look at how much effort we are putting into this. It's very expensive. And how much money are we making as a business? It's like we're getting, at that time, $5,000 per website. Now we call them website, but back then it was very high-tech, okay? So, give me at least that. It was very high-tech.
Yes. Yeah.
But it's just website building.
Okay.
$5,000, sales cycle of 3 to 6 months. And we got 5 or 6 PhDs doing this. If you
How long did it take to build a website back then?
Huh?
How long did it take to build a website back then?
Okay. This is going to be embarrassing, but we actually had to write the code, and none of the automation was available.
Yes,
okay?
yeah, I could imagine.
So we actually wrote it in the language called Perl. Enough said. Yeah. But we were very good at writing this code, right, to process the requests that were coming, and we're adding functionality, e-commerce, and things like that. James, who's this other brilliant lawyer friend, sort of kind of convinced me that we didn't have a business.
Oh,
right.
Yeah.
But more significantly, it left me sort of devastated because our team members don't believe in the vision, and and I was also doing part-time flying back and forth between Hong Kong and so on. So long story short, we have to face a shutdown, and by then I had invested. Together we had invested a total of $200,000.
Wow. At that point in time,
that was very large, right? We're
too.
Yeah. Our annual earnings at the time was an amazing $75,000 US, right? That was like top class, right? Anyway, so you can see how much capital that was sort of blown away, by people who trusted us and so on. That's funny. You look at the cap table; it's like 20, 30 rows long. It's just really immature, amateurish, I should say. But anyway, we went through the process of, voluntary, so, okay, fine, we're going to wind down. I didn't even have the stomach to go through that process, so I asked James, I said, hey, you want to do this? You take care of the cleaning up. I went back to Hong Kong. I remember lying in bed, for days and all that.
Wow.
Right, being very dejected, right? Now, there's a flip side to that story, which is, this was around the time when the internet was crazy. Think about it like Bitcoin today, right?
Yeah.
When people were like throwing money at things without any kind of value behind it. So, for example, there's this company called US Web. It has its own history. But anyway, it was going around acquiring these, what we now call web design firms. It doesn't matter what their profitability was. It just needed to accumulate a lot of revenues. And by the time they can acquire, they get about, back then, $20 million US in revenue, they could go IPO. Right? So, long story short, there's one possible path where we could have just stuck around.
And then sell it to them?
Just sell it to them, and they would go IPO, we get the IPO stock, right? So, but we didn't do that. In fact, we talked to Joe Firmage, and I didn't think the guy was a serious guy. I said, no, we're not going to do this, right? Because he's just like playing a portfolio game. Mm-hmm. So we didn't believe in that. Right? Mm-hmm. So we could have sold, but here's a twist to that story.
Another twist.
That's one twist. I mean, the second twist.
Yeah.
Do you think I regret not doing that?
No.
Why not?
Because I think if you stuck around, maybe that deal didn't happen, or that plan of that company going IPO didn't happen.
No, it did happen.
It did?
It would have happened. Yeah. In fact, I have friends who invested in U.S. web venture that are still friends today, 30 years later. And I did regret it in the following years.
Oh, you did?
But I don't now. And why is that?
I don't know. Tell me.
Because I'm very sure it would have been ephemeral success. Right?
Oh, I see.
We would have gone IPO together with U.S. Web. We could have gotten some money, and then the whole thing would implode in the year 2000, just a few years later, and the fall would have been much greater. Yeah. So in a way, you think about it, I was very lucky.
I see.
I was very lucky to be shielded. I was in Asia at the time when the 2000 crash happened. Mm-hmm. And a lot of my friends and others that had gone up this wave, came crashing down, essentially came down 95%, 99%, right? Mm. I went through that relatively unscathed.
I see.
That's what I mean by don't peak too early.
Or else the fall is going to be larger. And
yeah.
Wow, what a great story. Every time I ask you this question, there's an amazing story in front of it. I better keep asking this question. I'm sure you have many in your pockets. But in interest of time, we're going to pass the deep part of our conversation here. Just going to ask you a few quick questions to end the podcast with some more lighthearted fun. So, Dr. Christopher, if you were 18 today and you were going to decide on what to study for your future, how are you going to make that decision?
Oh, is this like advice to 18-year-olds, or if I had to do it over again? Or
if you were 18 years old today,
what advice would I?
What would you do for? Yeah.
Some people think that AI is such a force that it's impossible to know what is valuable skills 5 years from now, even 10 years from now. I think that statement is false. I think it is true that we don't know what job titles there would be in 10 years. But, computer programmer or software engineer was not even a term, a number of years ago. So that hasn't changed. There has always been new job titles, new roles. It's happening a little faster. But I think there's certain fundamental skills that we humans will continue to possess, and the lucky ones amplify and get paid for it. Mm. And with respect to this AI world, I would like to delineate it by what I'm observing to be the separation between the executive function and the operating function. Kai-Fu Lee, when he was asked about the workforce in the future and what jobs would go away, I think he has the right mental model, which is don't ask what jobs will go away, ask what functions of a job will go away, right? Like your job would change, my job would change, right? But there will still be the equivalent of CEO of a software company and so on. And I think a lot of the operating or operational functions will become increasingly automated. But the judgment, the decision-making, the executive function will remain, right? And in order for you to have a good sense to be in a position to make such, decisions, certain skills, certain subjects are always going to be relevant. And I literally come back to things like physics, statistics, right? If I had a chance to, if I had to throw away one course or one subject, if I had to throw away one, and then in order to make room for statistics in high school, I would absolutely choose statistics over calculus any day. Right? So statistics, when you understand it well and when you really live it, it is really a way of thinking. Right? I think
yes. Yeah.
I think most people don't think in terms of statistics. That's why we make errors all the time. and physics is judgment about the physical world, right? So if I were an 18-year-old, and whether I learn it through YouTube or I go to college, whatever education topics, education delivery method that I end up choosing, I would make sure that I concentrate on these fundamental subjects. Not all of them are, right? I just said that I would be willing to trade off calculus. If you have time, of course, it's useful.
Yeah.
But definitely pay attention to these fundamental topics that help you with your decision making, with your judgment.
Just one more question. Fundamentally, what is your definition of entrepreneurship, and how do you define success as an entrepreneur? That will be the last question of today.
I think entrepreneurship can exist everywhere, inside a company, inside a university. I think the common thing about entrepreneurship is the willingness or even the desire to create something out of nothing. Mm-hmm. And of course, there's nothing that ever is created out of nothing. Yeah. So really, that something that is there, that was nothing, came from you, came from your knowledge, your willpower, your ability to persuade other people, and so on, right? But you have to have the willingness and the ability to move others, right? To persuade other people, and then to make things happen. So the willingness to do that, the desire to do that, and the ability that combine, in my view, the characteristics of entrepreneurship, right? And of course, there's the specifics of entrepreneurship of building a business, but I think it follows that pattern, right? And I think the second part of your question is the desire, the drive.
Definition of success.
So definition of success. I think I always answer every question with what I don't like to be the answer. I do not like the answer, and this is it doesn't matter what I say. The world will still use the word success to mean money, right? If we can sort of map it back to the level of intelligence, to me that's sort of level 1 success, right? Once you achieve that, you realize that, like Maslow's pyramid, what's up there? When what's up there is usually at this point self-actualization.
Yeah.
Right. So I think I would like the definition of success to be at level 2, right? Which is, sure, you can get financial success, but don't ever refer to someone being successful to mean they have money, right? And that's pretty toxic because people's actions correlate with that.
Yes.
So you may not have observed it by actively, disdain is not the right word, but let's say there's a dinner and there's somebody that's known to have a lot of money. I actively don't talk to them. Right? I talk to people that are otherwise ignored.
I see.
Right. I just make a practice of that to sort of train my brain to not fall into that trap.
Yes, we can fall into that trap so easily.
Everybody does, right? Everybody does. Yeah. So I think my definition of success would have to be a level higher than that. That you, for your own definition of self-actualization, you feel that you have a place in the world. You feel that you have value to society, right? It could be dangerous, right? But that's sort of the name of the game, right? Success doesn't. It could be that you don't feel that you're contributing at all, right? For all the money you've got,
yes,
right? But maybe money is the initial drive, but then self-worth is the ultimate drive, right? And so, to me, success is that you have a sense of self-worth. It's more internally driven than somehow imposed by the outside world with accolades, or that man is so successful and so on. That's level 1. Right? And I think people who have to achieve that level 1 know very deeply what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. I've talked to a few of those, and I wouldn't claim myself to be financially successful in a conventional definition, but I've definitely been through that cycle of achieving material success and then just feel nothing about it and feel empty inside, and there's a lack of meaning and deep joy, even though the success is being congratulated and celebrated by the outside world.
That's right.
So, yeah.
Don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with level 1.
Of course.
It's just but there's everything wrong with thinking it is everything.
Yeah. But it shouldn't be the drive behind the drive in your entrepreneurship journey, right? That's what I've been thinking about as well. Yeah.
Right.
Dr. Christopher, thank you so much for the conversation today. I've always learned a lot, and I love how you have so much deep philosophy behind everything that I ask.
A lot of long answers. Right?
No, I love it. I hope my listener appreciate that too. Yep. So thank you so much for the time today.
All right, thank you for having me.
Hey, những người bạn doanh nhân của Zero to X. Chương trình podcast này được làm với rất nhiều tình yêu từ bản thân mình và những người trong team của mình. Tất cả mọi người đều tình nguyện thời gian của họ. Nếu bạn thích chương trình này thì hãy mua tặng tụi mình một ly cà phê. Tụi mình đều là những con nghiện cà phê. Nếu có sự ủng hộ của bạn thì tụi mình sẽ làm ra những tập podcast mới phê hơn nữa. Hãy check out link ở trong description nha.